In early 2019, while most people were busy following the usual news, something was happening far away from public eyes. A small group of people, scientists, astronauts, engineers, were preparing for a mission that almost no one knew about. It wasn't on TV, it wasn't in the newspapers, it wasn't even listed in the official records of NASA or the European Space Agency. It was hidden under a name that meant nothing to the outside world: Artemis Echo. The mission had one goal. A strange area had been found on the far side of the moon, an area that didn't make sense. Satellites had picked up something unusual there. For years, every time imaging satellites passed over that region, their readings would go off: strange magnetic signals, odd patterns of heat, and sometimes a sudden blackout of communication. At first, these things were written off as technical glitches. But after a while, someone higher up started asking questions, and the more they looked, the more they saw. Or didn't see. That region, deep in the shadow of an unnamed crater, had somehow avoided real exploration. Even during the Apollo missions, astronauts had never gone near it. In fact, if you compared old mission maps, you'd see that this area had been blurred out, covered, ignored, like someone didn't want anyone asking questions. But now, in 2019, those questions were coming back, and they needed answers. The crew chosen for Artemis Echo was small, just 5 people. 3 astronauts, all experienced in space travel, 1 engineer, quiet but brilliant, and 1 civilian, Dr. Lena Varga, an astrophysicist who had spent most of her life studying deep space signals, strange pulses that came from far beyond our solar system. She wasn't a military officer. She wasn't used to keeping secrets. But her research had caught the attention of someone powerful, and she'd been asked, told really, to join the mission. They trained in silence. No press, no public send-off. They launched from a private site in northern Scandinavia, away from crowds and cameras. The rocket was disguised as a satellite delivery system. No one asked questions. The journey took 4 days. Quiet, cold, just like every other lunar trip. But there was a tension inside the spacecraft that never faded. The crew knew this wasn't a regular mission. The official reason was to study mineral formations, but none of them believed that. Especially not Lena. From the moment she saw the real data, the magnetic patterns, the heat signals, she knew something wasn't right. This wasn't geology. It wasn't a natural formation. Something was there. They entered orbit around the moon without any problems. The far side stretched out beneath them, quiet and gray and untouched. It always felt lonelier somehow, being on the side of the moon that Earth never sees. There's no radio signal, no backup, just silence. After 2 orbits, they saw it. From a distance, it didn't look like much, just a dark patch at the edge of a crater. But as they got closer, it became clear. This wasn't a shadow. It was something else. Something with straight edges. Something too smooth to be rock. It was partially buried in lunar dust, but enough of it was visible to see that it didn't belong. They circled again, slower this time. Instruments started acting up. The guidance system glitched. The temperature sensors gave false readings. Lena's laptop refused to boot, showing only a black screen with a flicker of white light at the edge. The engineer, Marcos, muttered something about radiation, but it didn't feel like that. It felt deliberate. Despite the equipment failures, they prepared for descent. The pilot, Commander Reeves, hesitated for a moment before giving the final go. "Whatever that is," he said quietly, "we're not turning back now." The lander touched down just 300 meters from the edge of the object. Dust rose in slow motion, hanging in the airless sky like smoke. The silence outside was total. Stepping onto the surface never gets old. Even for experienced astronauts, the first step on the moon is always something sacred. But this time something felt different. Lena said it first. "It's too quiet." Not in the normal way, like space is quiet, but in a deeper way. Like sound itself had been swallowed up. They walked toward the object carefully, taking photos, collecting samples. It looked metallic, but it didn't reflect light the way metal should. It almost seemed to absorb it. The surface was cool, not cold, and perfectly smooth, no cracks, no dents. Just one long, curved wall that stretched into the crater. Marcos brought out the scanner. The readings were nonsense. No radiation, no mass, no magnetic field. As if the object wasn't really there. As if it was more idea than matter. Then they found the markings. Tiny lines etched into the surface like writing, but not in any language they recognized. Not even symbols, just patterns, like something halfway between math and art. Lena knelt down and ran her gloved fingers across one. Her head jerked slightly. She stood up too fast. Did you feel that? She asked. Feel what? Reeves replied, looking around. I don't know. It was like something brushed against my mind. No one laughed. No one made a joke. Because they had all felt something. Back at the lander, their communications were failing. Earth was still receiving their signals, but they couldn't hear mission control anymore. It was like a one-way street had suddenly been closed. They stayed near the object for hours, trying to find a way in. There were no doors, no seams, just one long wall that curved inward, disappearing into the ground. But then as the shadows shifted, Lena saw something, just a flicker. A corner that hadn't been there before. It was an opening. A doorway, barely wide enough for a person. No one said anything for a long time. Then Reeves spoke. We go in. We've come too far not to. They entered in pairs, with Lena and Reeves going first. The inside was darker than anything Lena had ever seen. Not black, absent. Like their eyes couldn't understand what they were seeing. The floor wasn't flat. The walls weren't walls. Everything seemed to bend and move, but when she looked directly, it stopped. She felt pressure in her head, like altitude sickness. A sound too, but not one she could hear, more like a low vibration inside her bones. Then she saw something moving. It wasn't a creature. It wasn't even a shape. Just motion, like a ripple in reality. She reached for Reeves, but he was frozen, staring ahead. Do you see it? She asked. He nodded slowly. I don't think we're supposed to be here. Suddenly, Lena felt cold deep inside. Not from fear, but from knowing. From the feeling that this place had been waiting. For them, for someone, for anyone to open the door. They returned to the lander in silence. No one said what they saw. No one could explain it. But the look in their eyes said enough. Back inside, Lena tried to sleep. But the dreams were not hers. She saw stars she had never visited, planets that had never been mapped, and always that same vibration in her bones. She woke up crying. She wasn't sure why. The next morning, the doorway was gone. The surface was smooth again, as if it had never been there. They weren't sure what to report. What could they say? That they found a structure with no material, a room with no walls, a presence that knew they were there. They sent what data they could, images, scans, audio recordings of the strange hum. Then they waited. Earth never replied, and that was only the beginning. The day after the strange doorway disappeared, the crew of the Artemis Echo mission woke up with heavy minds. None of them slept well. Not because of the usual worries about equipment or their return trip, but because something about the place was still inside them, something they couldn't explain, something they couldn't forget. Commander Reeves looked around the cabin first thing in the morning. The others were quiet, avoiding eye contact. No one wanted to talk about what they had seen, or maybe what they thought they had seen. Silence had settled over the crew like a thick fog. The air inside the lander was recycled and stale, but there was another heaviness, like a weight pressing down on their spirits. Lena sat by the small window, staring at the crater below. The dark, empty space where the doorway had been was now smooth again. The surface was as if untouched by anything unnatural. Marcos broke the silence. Maybe it was a hallucination. Stress, maybe. We're all tired. The radiation here is different. Could be messing with us, but no one really believed that. Not really, Lena shook her head. It wasn't just a trick of the mind. The structure changed. We saw it with our own eyes. It wasn't supposed to be open. And now it's gone. Reeves rubbed his face. If what we saw is real, then what does it mean? Why would something like that be here? On the moon? Who built it, or what built it? No one had answers. No one could imagine the questions. The team decided to run more scans of the area. They needed to understand if there was more to the place than just a weird object. Lena took charge of the scientific instruments. She wanted to map everything, every inch, every strange reading. But the instruments didn't behave normally. The scanners, which should have been precise, gave inconsistent data. Sometimes the crater's shape would appear distorted on the screens. Sometimes the temperature would spike for no reason. And every time they pointed their radios or sensors toward the object, signals got scrambled. The lander's communications began to falter even more. Earth was still sending messages, but the crew found themselves unable to respond clearly. Voices came through broken and garbled, like a radio stuck between channels. Sometimes no messages came at all. The astronauts tried to keep their spirits up. They joked sometimes, but the jokes felt hollow. They held group meetings every few hours to share what they were feeling and thinking. These talks helped some, but Lena noticed that day by day the crew seemed more tired. Not from physical work, but from something deeper, a mental exhaustion that didn't go away. One evening, Lena was alone in the cabin, reviewing the data again. She noticed a pattern in the scrambled radio signals. At first it looked like noise, but after hours of listening and analyzing, she realized there was a rhythm, a pulse, a signal that repeated almost like a heartbeat. She showed the others the recording. "Listen," she said. They put on headphones one by one. The sound was strange. Not music, not words, but a pattern, a slow, steady beat like a drum. Could it be a message? Marcos asked, eyes wide. "It's possible," Lena replied, "but not a message for us. Maybe for whoever built that thing. Or maybe it's a warning." Suddenly, the lights in the lander flickered. The oxygen system gave a small warning beep. For a moment, they all froze. The lander was their only lifeline. Reeves grabbed the controls, checking the systems. "False alarm," he said, but his voice was tense. "But the systems are acting strange. The air recycler, the temperature controls. Everything is glitching." The next day, they decided to explore more of the crater's edge. If the object was part of something bigger, maybe they could find clues. The surface outside was dusty and rocky. The low gravity made each step feel light but awkward. As they moved closer to the shadows, the strange feeling returned, a pressure in their chests like the air was thicker. Even though they were in their suits, breathing filtered and controlled, it felt as if something invisible was pressing down. Lena took pictures of the ground near the object. There were strange marks, fine scratches and perfect geometric patterns unlike anything natural. She collected small rock samples but noticed that some seemed to have a faint glow, visible only in the lander's special lights. Marcos's scanner suddenly beeped loudly. There's something under the surface," he said. They began to dig carefully using small tools. After a few minutes, they uncovered a panel, a smooth piece of material, not metal, not rock. It looked almost organic. It pulsed gently under their tools, like it was alive. Reeves ordered the team to stop. "We don't know what this is. Let's not touch anything we don't understand." But Lena's curiosity was stronger than caution. She reached out, carefully pressing her gloved hand against the panel. In that instant, a wave of images crashed into her mind. Not pictures like photographs, but feelings. Memories, flashes of things she couldn't explain. She saw stars burning in colors she had never known. She felt cold and warmth at the same time. She saw shapes moving faster than light and voices, no, thoughts reaching across space. She gasped and pulled back, stumbling. Her helmet's comm crackled as she tried to speak, but the words didn't come out right. The crew helped her back to the lander. Inside, Lena sat quietly, her eyes distant. "What did you see?" Marcos asked gently. "I don't know," she whispered. "It wasn't real, but it was. Like a dream made of memories that aren't mine." Reeves frowned. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," Lena said, shaking her head. Over the next days, Lena's behavior changed. She became withdrawn, sometimes talking to herself in soft voices. The others noticed but didn't know what to do. They were all dealing with their own feelings and fears. The lander's instruments kept malfunctioning. Every time they got close to the object, more problems appeared. Communications with Earth continued to worsen until finally, no messages came through at all. The crew was completely alone. One night, Reeves called a meeting. "We can't stay here forever. We have to figure out if this place is safe and if the object is a threat." Lena spoke up. "I think it's not just a thing. It's something alive. Maybe not alive like us, but alive in a way we don't understand. It's reacting to us, learning from us." Marcos looked skeptical.
"How can something without a body be alive?"
"I don't know," Lena said, "but I feel it. Like it's watching us." The crew agreed to stay close but not touch anything else. They tried to gather as much data as possible without disturbing the object. Days passed. Then, something impossible happened. The lander's cameras caught a faint light coming from inside the crater. At first, it was just a flicker. Then a slow, steady glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. The light grew brighter, but it didn't blind them. It was calm, almost soothing. Reeves stared at the screen. "Is it a signal?" Lena nodded. "I think so. They prepared to move closer but stopped when the lander suddenly shook violently. The ground trembled beneath them and dust rose in thick clouds. The object began to change. Walls shifted. The smooth surfaces rippled, like water disturbed by a stone. The doorway appeared again, wide open this time. The crew looked at each other, fear and wonder mixed in their eyes. Reeves said, "We have to go inside." Lena hesitated. Her mind raced with warnings and memories from the strange vision she had. But the curiosity, the need to know, was stronger. They suited up and approached the glowing doorway. As they stepped inside, the air around them felt different, warmer, fuller. The walls shimmered like liquid glass. Time seemed to slow. Inside, they found a chamber that stretched farther than the lander's walls. Strange symbols glowed faintly along the surfaces. Lena reached out and touched one. The moment she did, a wave of images flooded her mind again. Visions of stars, planets, and beings who had come to this place long ago. She saw how the object had been left here, waiting, watching. A message in time. She gasped and fell to her knees. Reeves helped her up. "What is it?" "It's not just a ship," she said slowly. "It's a library. A message. A place where knowledge waits." They explored more, careful but drawn deeper into the mystery. Back in the lander, they recorded everything, hoping Earth would hear them. But still there was no reply. Days turned into weeks. The object's secrets slowly unfolded, but so did the crew's doubts and fears. What were they really looking for? What if the knowledge was more than they could handle? And what if the message was not meant for them? The days that followed their first entry into the glowing chamber were some of the most confusing and frightening that the Artemis Echo crew had ever faced. They had crossed a line, one that none of them fully understood. What they found inside that place on the moon was nothing like any human had ever seen before. It was as if they had stepped into a new kind of reality. After returning from the chamber, the crew gathered in the lander's small common area, trying to make sense of what had happened. Lena sat quietly, staring at the floor. The others looked tired and nervous. The weight of their discovery hung in the air like thick smoke. Reeves broke the silence. "We need to talk about what we saw inside. We can't just pretend it was a normal place." Lena nodded slowly. "It wasn't just a room. The walls, they weren't walls. They moved, shifted. The symbols, they weren't just drawings. They were alive in a way. I could feel them communicating. Not with words, but with thoughts." Marcos looked skeptical but curious. "Thoughts? You mean like telepathy?" "I don't know," Lena said softly. "But it was like the symbols were telling me things. About stars, about time, about beings who came before us. I saw flashes of their history, their knowledge." The others listened carefully. They had all felt strange sensations, but none had been able to explain them. Lena was the first to admit what she experienced. Reeves took a deep breath. "If that's true, then what does it mean for us? Are we the first humans to ever enter that place?" Lena shook her head. "No. The message I saw, it said we're not the first. Others have been here before us. But it also said we won't be the last." The word sent a chill through the room. None of them wanted to imagine what that meant. In the following days, the crew tried to piece together more of the puzzle. They returned to the chamber several times, each visit revealing new images, new feelings. The place seemed to respond to them, changing slightly as if it was alive and curious. One afternoon, Lena was alone inside the chamber. She reached out to touch a glowing symbol etched into the wall. As her fingers brushed the surface, a sudden wave of images flooded her mind again. This time the visions were stronger, clearer. She saw a star system far beyond their own. Planets orbiting strange suns. She saw ships, massive, unlike anything human-made, traveling faster than light. And then she saw the beings who controlled those ships. They were not human, but intelligent. Their forms were shifting, almost liquid, like creatures made of energy and light. Lena staggered back, breathless. When she reached the others, she tried to explain what she had seen. "They're ancient," she said. "Not aliens like we imagine, but something beyond. They existed before humans and maybe before Earth. They created this place as a message, or maybe as a warning." Reeves frowned. "A warning about what?" "I don't know," Lena replied. But the place itself felt dangerous. Not in a physical way, but something else. Like a test. Like it's waiting to see if we're ready. The others exchanged uneasy looks. The mission had become more than a scientific expedition. It was turning into something much bigger and more uncertain. As the days passed, the crew began to experience strange side effects. It started with headaches and vivid dreams. Then came moments when they felt detached from reality, as if their minds were slipping away. One night, Marcos disappeared. He had been working outside, collecting samples near the crater. When the others called for him to come back, there was no answer. They searched for hours, but Marcos was gone. Inside the lander, panic grew. They checked every system, every camera feed. The last image of Marcos showed him walking toward a glowing section of the crater wall, the same place where the doorway had appeared and disappeared. Reeves organized a search party, but as they stepped outside, the strange feelings returned. A heavy silence pressed on them. Time seemed to slow, and the stars above the moon appeared to shift. Lena whispered, "He's not lost." "Not really. Something took him." Reeves frowned. "We can't just leave him out there." They followed the trail Marcos had left, moving toward the glowing wall. Suddenly, a pulse of light burst from the surface, and the wall shimmered. Then Marcos appeared. But he was different. He didn't speak. His eyes were blank, distant. He walked slowly toward them, as if controlled by something else. Lena stepped forward, trying to reach him. "Marcos, can you hear me?" He stopped and turned his empty gaze toward her. Then, without warning, he collapsed. Inside the lander, they tended to him, but Marcos didn't wake. Medical instruments showed no injury, no illness. It was as if his mind had been taken somewhere else. Days passed, and the crew grew more anxious. The object on the moon was no longer just a curiosity. It was a force they couldn't control or understand. Lena spent hours studying the symbols and recordings. She tried to decode the messages, hoping to find a way to bring Marcos back. One evening, she finally found a pattern, a series of symbols that repeated like a phrase. She carefully traced them, speaking the sounds aloud. Suddenly, the room filled with a soft hum. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, and Lena felt a warmth spread through her chest. Then, in her mind, she heard a voice, not words, but feelings of calm and welcome. It told her that Marcos's mind was trapped in a place between worlds, but not lost. He was safe, learning, waiting. Lena shared this with the others. It gave them hope, but also fear. They realized that whatever this place was, it didn't follow human rules. It was a living enigma. Reeves made a decision. They would try to communicate directly with the object, not through machines, but through their own minds. The crew gathered inside the chamber again, holding hands, trying to open themselves to the presence they felt. For hours, nothing happened. Then slowly the walls began to shimmer. Symbols flowed like water. The hum grew louder, filling the room. Each of them felt a connection, a thread linking their thoughts to the object. Memories, emotions, images, all mingled and danced before their eyes. Lena saw the history of the beings who created the place, their rise and fall, their search for knowledge, their hope for others to understand. Reeves saw warnings of dangers beyond their solar system, forces that could destroy worlds. Marcos, somewhere between consciousness and the unknown, reached out through the connection. His eyes fluttered and a faint smile appeared. The crew understood. They were part of something much larger than themselves. They were the next link in a chain that stretched across time and space. But with that knowledge came a new question. What were they supposed to do next? Could they trust what the object showed them? Was it truly a gift or a trap? As the connection faded, the chamber returned to silence. Lena looked at her crewmates and said, "We've seen things no one else has. But now we have to decide, do we stay and learn more, or do we leave before we lose ourselves?" The answer was not clear. Fear and curiosity warred inside each of them. They were far from Earth, far from help. The moon was no longer just a place of rock and dust. It was a gateway to something unknown. And the crew of Artemis Echo was caught in the middle of a mystery where reason no longer worked. After their incredible experience inside the glowing chamber, the crew of Artemis Echo found themselves facing something far bigger than just a mission on the moon. They were trapped between curiosity and fear, between hope and doubt. The mystery of the alien ship, or whatever it was, had become the center of their entire world. Every moment, every breath seemed tied to what they might discover next. The lander had become their small, fragile home. It felt safe but also claustrophobic. The moon outside was silent, empty, yet the strange object nearby hummed with life. It was like they were living between two worlds, one they understood, one they didn't. Reeves gathered the crew again for a serious talk. They needed to decide what to do. Should they stay and keep exploring the alien ship, or should they leave and return to Earth with what little they had? "I know this mission was supposed to be about science," Reeves said, looking at everyone's tired faces. "But what we're dealing with now, it's beyond science. It's something else," Lena nodded. "It's like the ship is alive. It knows we're here. It's watching us. I can feel it." Marcos, who had finally woken but was still weak, added quietly, "When I was inside, I saw things. Things no one should see. It's beautiful but also terrifying." The others listened, feeling the weight of their words. Reeves took a deep breath. "We have two choices. We stay and risk losing ourselves in this place, or we leave and try to explain what happened to the people on Earth. We might never get answers, but at least we'd be safe." The room fell silent. No one wanted to say it out loud, but they all knew the truth. They were afraid. Afraid of what staying might do to them. Afraid of what leaving might mean. Afraid of the unknown. Lena broke the silence. "What if the ship wants us to stay? What if it's testing us?" Reeves shook his head. "We can't let fear control us. We have to be careful. We need to think about the mission, about humanity." Days passed and the crew continued their work. They studied the symbols, recorded the strange sounds, and tried to communicate with the object. The lander's system still flickered, and communication with Earth was completely lost. Every day brought new questions. Every night brought strange dreams. Some of the crew started to have visions, glimpses of places they had never been and faces they couldn't recognize. Lena woke one morning with a pounding headache. She had dreamed of a voice, soft and gentle, calling her name. When she told the others, they nodded. They all had similar dreams. "It's like the ship is reaching out to us," Lena said. "But why? What does it want?" One afternoon, the crew noticed something new. The surface of the crater was changing. Where there had once been dust and rock, now strange patterns appeared, glowing faintly in the low light. Marcos examined the patterns closely. "They're moving," he said, eyes wide. "Like they're alive." The crew watched in awe as the patterns shifted and formed shapes, circles, lines, and symbols they had seen inside the chamber. Reeves said quietly, "It's a message. The ship is trying to communicate." Excited but cautious, the crew decided to send a signal back. Using the lander's radio, they broadcast the patterns, hoping for a response. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a pulse of light erupted from the crater's center. The glowing doorway opened again, wider than before. The crew looked at each other, hearts pounding. This time, the invitation felt clearer. Reeves took the lead. "We're going back inside, but we stay together." Inside the chamber, the walls shimmered even more brightly. The symbols danced like living beings. The air was warm and felt thick, like it had weight. Lena reached out to touch one symbol, and instantly she was flooded with memories. Visions of a civilization long gone. She saw cities made of light, creatures who could shape energy with their minds, and a great journey across the stars. But then, the vision shifted. She saw destruction, fire, chaos, a great darkness consuming everything. She gasped and pulled back. "It's a warning," she said. "The creators of this place faced a terrible fate. They left this message to warn others." Reeves looked serious. "We have to understand this warning. If it's true, it could mean danger for us, for Earth." The crew decided to explore deeper into the ship. They found rooms filled with strange technology, machines that hummed softly, glowing spheres that floated in the air, and walls covered in shifting patterns. As they moved, they discovered something unexpected, a device that looked like a map. It showed stars and planets, some familiar, some completely unknown. Lena studied the map carefully. "This could be a star chart," she said. "Maybe a guide for travel, or a history of where these beings went." Marcos added, "If we can understand it, maybe we can learn how to protect ourselves." But the deeper they explored, the more they felt the ship's presence. It was as if the place was alive and watching their every move. One night, Lena sat alone, staring at the stars through the lander's small window. She thought about Earth, about her family, about the life she had left behind. Suddenly, the lander's systems flickered. The radio crackled to life. A voice came through, soft, distant, and filled with emotion. Help us, cried. The crew froze. The voice was not human. It was the voice of the ship, or maybe the beings who had created it. Reeves responded slowly. Who are you? What do you want? The radio went silent. Lena whispered, I think the ship is alive. It's not just a place, but a being. And it's reaching out for help. The crew knew their mission had changed. They were no longer just explorers. They were part of something much bigger, a story of survival, hope, and maybe even redemption. But the question remained, could they trust the ship? Could they trust what they heard? Days turned into weeks. The crew struggled with their fears and hopes. They shared stories from Earth, memories of home, and dreams of the future. They grew closer, relying on each other to stay sane in a place where reason no longer worked. One morning, Reeves called the crew together. I've been thinking, he said, maybe this ship is a test. Maybe we're being judged. If we can prove ourselves, our courage, our compassion, maybe the ship will reveal its secrets. Lena nodded. That makes sense. The visions, the messages, they're trying to see who we are. Marco smiled weakly. Then let's show them what humans are made of. The crew agreed to work together to stay strong and keep learning. They would face whatever came next, together. Outside, the moon was quiet. The stars shone bright. The glowing ship waited, and the crew of Artemis Echo stood at the edge of a new beginning. The days after Reeves's decision felt different. The crew had made a choice to face the unknown together, to show that they were more than just explorers. They were human beings with hope, courage, and heart. It was strange how, even in the middle of the silent moon, they found a new sense of purpose. The ship nearby, the alien object that had first confused and scared them, felt less like a threat and more like a puzzle waiting to be solved. The glowing symbol still moved and changed, but now the crew wasn't afraid. They were ready to learn what the ship wanted to share. Lena spent hours each day inside the chamber, trying to communicate in whatever way she could. She found that when she was calm and open, the symbols responded more clearly. It was like they were testing her, trying to understand if she was trustworthy. One morning, as the crew gathered for their daily meeting, Lena showed them something new. She had found a series of symbols that, when she touched them in the right order, created a gentle hum that filled the room. Reeves smiled. Looks like you cracked the code. It's more than that, Lena said. It's like a message of peace. The crew listened as Lena described the symbols. They seemed to tell a story about a civilization that had once been powerful but had faced great danger. They had created the ship as a way to survive and to warn others, Marcos added. They left behind knowledge, maybe even a way to protect ourselves. Reeves nodded slowly. If we can unlock that knowledge, we might be able to prevent the same fate. The crew agreed to work together, combining their skills and knowledge. They set up a small lab inside the lander, where they could study the symbols and patterns without being overwhelmed. But even as they worked, the strange effects of the ship were still there. Sometimes the crew would feel a sudden wave of emotion, a mix of joy, sadness, and fear that they couldn't explain. Dreams became more vivid. Some nights they woke up feeling like they had been somewhere else entirely. One evening, Lena found herself drawn back to the chamber alone. She stepped inside, and the symbols began to glow softly around her. As she reached out to touch them, the light enveloped her. Suddenly, she was somewhere else. She was standing in a vast, endless space filled with stars. Around her were shapes of light, creatures made of pure energy moving gracefully. They didn't speak with words, but with feelings. Lena felt peace and sadness at the same time. The beings showed her visions of their history, their rise, their discoveries, and their final struggle against a dark force that threatened to destroy everything. She understood then that the ship was not just a warning, but a beacon. It was calling for help, asking for someone to carry on their legacy. When Lena returned to the lander, she was quiet for a long time. She told the crew what she had seen. We have to help them, she said. Not just for us, but for all life, Reeves agreed. But how? We don't even know what kind of help they need. Marcos looked thoughtful. Maybe the ship holds the answer. The crew decided to explore deeper into the ship again. This time they found a room filled with glowing crystals and strange machines. The crystals pulsed with light, and when touched they sent waves of energy through the room. Lena reached out to one crystal. The ship hummed, and suddenly, the room lit up with images, a map of the galaxy showing points of light that blinked on and off. "This must be their home," Lena whispered. Reeves studied the map. And those blinking lights could be places where they sent messages, or maybe other ships. The crew realized that the ship was part of a network, a system built to share knowledge across the stars. They worked for days, trying to understand the technology. It was unlike anything they had seen, but slowly, pieces started to make sense. One night, the lander's system suddenly went dark. The crew was plunged into silence. Then a voice echoed through the chamber, clearer than before. "Thank you." It was soft, gentle, full of gratitude. The crew looked at each other, stunned. "Who's there?" Reeves called out. A wave of calm filled the room. The voice responded, not with words this time, but with feelings. "We are the creators. We are the keepers of knowledge." "You are not alone." Lena felt tears in her eyes. "We will help you," she whispered. The next days were filled with discovery and wonder. The ship began to share more with them, knowledge of energy, space travel, even ways to heal and protect. But with the gift came a warning. The dark force that had destroyed the creators was still out there, a shadow moving through space, waiting. The crew understood that their mission had changed once again. They were no longer just explorers. They were guardians. They had to prepare. Reeves looked at the crew during one of their meetings. "We're far from home, but what we've found could change everything. We have a chance to protect not just Earth, but all life in the galaxy." Lena smiled. "We're ready." Marcos nodded. "Together we can face whatever comes." Outside, the moon was quiet. The stars shone brightly. The alien ship hummed softly, alive, watching, waiting, and the crew of Artemis Echo stood ready, holding on to hope, courage, and each other. The days grew quieter on the moon's surface, but inside the lander and the alien ship, everything was alive with energy. The crew of Artemis Echo had changed since they first arrived. They were no longer just scientists or astronauts. They had become protectors of something much bigger than themselves. Reeves often sat quietly, thinking about what lay ahead. He knew their mission was no longer just about discovery. It was about survival, not just for them, but for all life that might one day hear the warning they carried. One morning, Lena gathered the crew. "We have learned so much," she said, her voice steady. "But there is one thing we still don't understand, the dark force they warned us about. We need to be ready." Marcos nodded. "The creators faced it before. Maybe their knowledge will help us fight it," Reeves agreed. "We can't wait. We need to prepare now. We need to protect ourselves and the Earth." The crew began to work on understanding the technology inside the ship. They learned to use the glowing crystals as energy sources and to operate the strange machines that could create powerful shields. But learning was not easy. Sometimes the technology seemed to resist them, as if testing their worthiness. The ship's energy would flare, sending pulses that made their heads ache or their hearts race. Yet, with every challenge, the crew grew stronger in mind, body, and spirit. One night, Lena had another vision. This time she saw a star, dark and cold, surrounded by shadows. She felt a presence, a creeping darkness that swallowed light. When she shared her vision, the crew realized this was the dark force, the enemy the creators had warned them about. Reeves said quietly, "If this darkness reaches Earth, it could mean the end." The crew's faces were serious. The weight of their responsibility pressed heavily on them, but they also felt hope. The creators had left them a gift, knowledge, and a chance to fight back. As the days passed, the ship began to change. Its walls glowed brighter, the symbols shifting into new patterns. It was as if the ship itself was preparing the crew for what was to come. Then one evening, the lander's systems flickered again. The radio crackled and a voice came through, this time clear and strong. "Help is coming." The crew exchanged surprised looks. Who was speaking? Suddenly, a beam of light shot down from the stars, touching the ship. The ground trembled softly beneath their feet. Lena whispered, "It's not just us. Others are out there." Reeves stood tall. "We're not alone in this fight." The days that followed were filled with preparation and training. The crew learned to use the alien technology not just to defend, but to communicate across space. They sent messages hoping to find allies, but time was running out. The dark force was moving closer. One night, as the stars shone bright, the ship's energy pulsed wildly. The symbols on the walls danced like never before. Lena stood at the center of the chamber, feeling the power surround her. She heard a voice, not from the radio, but inside her mind. Trust yourself. You are ready. With renewed courage, the crew took their place inside the ship's command room. They activated the defenses, the glowing crystals humming with energy. Outside, the moon was quiet, but the sky beyond was full of stars, some shining, some hiding shadows. The crew waited, hearts beating fast, knowing that the battle for their future was about to begin. And in that moment, they understood something deeper than fear or hope. They were connected, not just to each other, but to a universe much larger than they had ever imagined. A universe where even the smallest light could shine bright in the darkest night. The end was not certain. But one thing was clear. As long as they stood together, as long as they held on to their humanity, they could face anything, and the story of Artemis Echo would live on. A story of courage, discovery, and the unbreakable spirit of those who dared to reach for the stars.